Hi, I'm Olivia, 35, and until recently, I thought I'd built a pretty stable life as a financial consultant. That was before my phone lit up with a text from my mom. Mortgage is due. This came just 6 months after I emptied my savings account of $60,000 to save their house from foreclosure. Oh, and did I mention they've left me out of their will entirely? The betrayal still burns in my chest. Join me as I share what happened when I finally responded to my mother's latest cash grab. Where are you watching from today? Hit that like and subscribe button before we dive deeper into how family financial dynamics can turn toxic. I'd love to know if you've ever had to set boundaries with loved ones who keep asking for money. I grew up in Maplewood Estates, a neighborhood that started as solidly middle class, but gradually declined over the years. My parents, Rachel and Donald, never quite mastered financial stability. Dad worked as a sales representative for a furniture company with inconsistent commissions, while Mom jumped between part-time administrative jobs, never holding one for more than a year or two. Then there was my sister, Heather, 3 years younger than me and the absolute apple of my parents' eyes. While I don't want to sound bitter, the pattern was established early and remained consistent throughout our childhood. When I needed new clothes for school, it was thrift shops and hand-me-downs. When Heather mentioned liking something, it appeared gift-wrapped the following week. My parents attributed this to her being more delicate and needing more support. I was this strong one who could handle disappointment. For my 16th birthday, I received a card with $20. 3 months later, Heather got a sweet 16 party that cost over $1,000, with all her friends invited to a local country club. When I asked why there was such a disparity, Mom simply said, Heather would be devastated without a proper party. You understand, don't you? And I did understand in my way. I understood that the family dynamic wasn't going to change, so I focused on what I could control: my future. I threw myself into academics, maintaining a 4.0 GPA throughout high school, joining every academic club and leadership opportunity available. While my parents attended Heather's dance recitals and softball games, they were conspicuously absent from my debate competitions and honor society inductions. But their absence only fueled my determination. When college acceptance letters arrived, I received several scholarships, but none covered everything. My parents sat me down and explained they couldn't contribute anything toward my education. We just don't have it, honey. You're so smart. You'll figure something out. Meanwhile, they were already discussing saving for Heather's college fund, even though she was barely maintaining C grades. So I figured it out. I worked 3 part-time jobs while studying finance at State University. Mornings at a coffee shop, evenings waiting tables, and weekends doing data entry for an insurance company. I lived on ramen noodles and free coffee, sleeping maybe 5 hours a night. When I called home during those years, conversations inevitably centered around Heather's latest achievements or my parents' financial woes. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a financial services firm. The starting salary wasn't impressive, but it offered stability and growth potential. I rented a tiny studio apartment and focused on advancing my career. Each promotion brought a small salary increase, which I managed carefully. Half went to paying down my substantial student loans, a quarter to savings, and the rest to living expenses. During my second year at the firm, I met Marcus, a software engineer whose family had taught him solid financial habits. We connected over our shared values of hard work and financial responsibility. His support became invaluable as my family's financial demands intensified. When an opportunity arose in a different city with a significant pay increase, Marcus encouraged me to take it. This is your chance, he said. You deserve to build your own life. We maintained our relationship long distance for a year before he found a job in my new city and joined me. By my 30th birthday, I had achieved significant milestones. My student loans were paid off. I had an emergency fund covering 6 months of expenses. Marcus and I moved in together, splitting expenses and saving for a potential home purchase. I had climbed to a senior financial consultant position, helping clients plan for their futures while finally feeling secure about my own. That's when the requests from my parents began to escalate. It started small. Dad calling to ask for $200 to cover an unexpected car repair. Mom needing $350 for a dental procedure insurance wouldn't cover. These loans were never repaid, but the amounts were small enough that I could write them off without significant hardship. Meanwhile, Heather's life followed a different trajectory. She'd attend college for a semester, drop out, try various jobs ranging from retail to restaurant work, never staying anywhere longer than a few months. Yet somehow, she maintained an expensive lifestyle, frequently posting social media updates from trendy restaurants or weekend getaways. When I asked her how she afforded these luxuries, she'd laugh and say, "You only live once." I later discovered our parents were subsidizing her lifestyle, despite their own precarious finances. When my parents retired, Dad at 65 and Mom at 62, it became apparent they had virtually no retirement savings. Dad's 401k had been depleted years earlier for what they called emergencies, many of which coincided with Heather's various financial crises. Their entire retirement plan seemed to consist of Social Security benefits and the vague hope that their modest home would somehow generate wealth. The warning signs of serious trouble were evident. Their mortgage, refinanced multiple times to pull out equity, still had 15 years of payments remaining. Credit card statements arrived in alarming stacks. Yet when I gently offered to help them create a budget or a financial plan, they bristled. "We're not children, Olivia," Mom would say, her voice tight with indignation. "We managed just fine before you became a financial big shot." Dad would add, "We don't need fancy spreadsheets. We just need to get through this rough patch." Every few months, they'd call with an emergency, requiring immediate financial assistance. The water heater broke. The property taxes increased unexpectedly. The car needed a major repair. Each time, I'd transfer the requested amount, ranging from a few hundred to a few $1,000s, with promises of repayment that never materialized. Marcus watched this pattern with growing concern. "They're treating you like their personal bank," he observed one evening after I'd sent my parents $1,200 for a new refrigerator. "At what point do you draw the line?" "They're my parents," I replied, though the response felt increasingly hollow. "What am I supposed to do? Let them suffer?" "There's a difference between helping and enabling," he said gently. "I'm worried they'll never stop asking, and you'll never start saying no." I dismissed his concerns, but deep down, I knew he was right. Each request stirred a complicated mixture of resentment and obligation. Yet I continued to respond to their financial SOS calls, telling myself it was temporary, that they would eventually stabilize. I couldn't have been more wrong. The call came at 11:37 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was already in bed, reviewing work documents for an important client meeting the next morning. Seeing Mom's name on the caller ID, I felt the familiar knot of anxiety form in my stomach. "Olivia?" Her voice trembled. "I don't know what to do. We got another notice from the bank today." "What notice?" I sat up, fully awake now. "It's about the mortgage. We're behind, and they're threatening foreclosure." My heart sank. "How far behind are you?" The ensuing silence told me it was bad. 3 months, she finally admitted. "We owe $8,500 including late fees. The letter says if we don't pay in full within 30 days, they'll start foreclosure proceedings." 3 months? Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner? How did it get this bad? Another silence. "There's more," she said quietly. "We're behind on other things too. The credit cards, the medical bills from Dad's gallbladder surgery last year, a personal loan from the credit union." By the time she finished listing everything, the total approached $25,000 in various debts, with the mortgage being the most urgent. I hung up after promising to figure something out, my mind racing with equal parts worry and frustration. Marcus found me at the kitchen table at 2 a.m., surrounded by financial calculations and furiously typing on my laptop. "Your parents?" he asked, already knowing the answer. I nodded, explaining the situation. He sat across from me, his expression serious. "Olivia, I love you, and I support you. But we need to talk about boundaries. This isn't a one-time emergency anymore. This is a pattern, and it's affecting our future too." He was right. The money I'd already sent my parents over the years could have been a down payment on the house we'd been saving for. Every dollar to them was a dollar not invested in our future together. That weekend, I drove 3 hours to my parents' home to assess the situation firsthand. The house looked shabbier than I remembered, the yard neglected, small repairs ignored until they'd become major issues. Inside wasn't much better. While they had a new large-screen TV and Mom had a collection of barely worn designer clothes in her closet, the kitchen faucet leaked steadily, and the bathroom ceiling showed water damage from a roof problem. Most disturbing was the stack of unopened mail on the dining room table. When I sorted through it, I found multiple notices from creditors, bills marked final notice, and statements showing minimum payments on maxed-out credit cards. "What's going on?" I asked, spreading the evidence across the table. "You're not even opening your bills anymore?" Dad looked away, suddenly interested in the baseball game on TV. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "It just got overwhelming," she said. "Every time we open something, it's bad news. Your father's blood pressure can't take the stress." "And the new TV? The clothes with tags still on them?" "We needed something to lift our spirits," Mom replied defensively. "You don't know how hard it's been since your father's health declined." Dad had developed type 2 diabetes the previous year, resulting in multiple doctor visits and prescriptions, some not fully covered by Medicare. But the medical bills accounted for less than a quarter of their debt. The rest was simple overspending. "Have you talked to Heather about any of this?" I asked. They exchanged uncomfortable glances. "We don't want to burden her," Dad said. "She's dealing with her own struggles." I stepped outside and called my sister, but predictably, it went to voicemail. "Heather, it's Olivia. I'm at Mom and Dad's, and they're in serious financial trouble. Call me back when you can." She never did. Back inside, my parents had moved from defensiveness to emotional manipulation. Mom pulled out old photo albums, reminiscing about our childhood. "Remember this house when you were little? All the birthdays, Christmases, family gatherings. This is our home, Olivia. We can't lose it." Dad mentioned his health concerns more directly. "The stress of moving at my age with my condition, I don't know if my heart could take it." I spent hours creating a realistic budget for them, identifying areas where they could cut expenses, even researching part-time work they could do to supplement their Social Security income. They nodded at all my suggestions, but I could see the information wasn't really penetrating. Before I left Sunday evening, I called a family meeting at the kitchen table. "I'm going to help with the immediate mortgage problem," I said, my voice firm. "I'll pay the $8,500 to prevent foreclosure. But this is a loan, not a gift. I'm setting up a payment plan, and I expect you to follow it." I showed them the spreadsheet I'd created, detailing a modest monthly repayment amount over 3 years. "Of course, sweetheart," Mom said, hugging me tightly. "You're our lifesaver. We'll pay back every penny." Dad nodded solemnly. "We won't let you down." I wanted to believe them. Needed to believe them. Back home, I consulted with a financial advisor about my options. She advised against the loan, pointing out that family loans rarely get repaid and often damage relationships. "If you do this," she warned, "go in with open eyes. Consider it a gift in your mind, even if you call it a loan to them." Despite her advice, I transferred the $8,500 from my savings to their bank account the next day. I also emailed them the repayment plan and budget we discussed. For the first few weeks afterward, my parents were effusively grateful. Mom called with updates on their adherence to the budget. Dad sent awkwardly worded but heartfelt text messages thanking me for my help. They made the first 2 monthly repayments on schedule, small amounts that nevertheless signaled commitment. Then communication reverted to normal. The budget updates stopped. The 3rd repayment was a week late. The 4th missed entirely with a vague excuse about an unexpected expense. When I inquired, Mom changed the subject to Heather's newest boyfriend or neighborhood gossip. Meanwhile, social media revealed that my parents had attended several expensive restaurants and purchased new patio furniture. When I gently asked about these expenses, Mom became defensive. "We're allowed to have a little enjoyment in our retirement, aren't we? We've worked hard all our lives." The repayment plan I'd created gathered digital dust in my documents folder, increasingly irrelevant. Heather remained notably absent from all financial discussions, though she visited our parents regularly. When I asked her directly if she knew about their financial situation, she responded with surprising hostility. Not everyone is obsessed with money like you, Olivia. They need emotional support, not just financial lectures. As weeks turned to months, I developed anxiety about seeing my parents' names on incoming calls. Each conversation left me feeling drained and used. Marcus noticed the pattern. "You're not responsible for their choices," he reminded me. "You've done more than most children would." But the worst was yet to come. 6 months after I paid off their mortgage arrears, the crisis I'd feared finally arrived. It was a Thursday evening when Mom called, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. The bank foreclosure, 30 days to vacate. After calming her down, I learned the devastating truth. Despite my previous help and all their promises, they hadn't made a single mortgage payment in the months since. The bank was no longer interested in payment plans or temporary solutions. They wanted the remaining mortgage balance paid in full, or they would proceed with foreclosure. "How much is left on the mortgage?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Just under $60,000, Mom whispered. The number hit me like a physical blow.
$62,000.
More than I'd paid for my car. A significant portion of the down payment Marcus and I had been saving for our first home. A sum that would take years to replace in my savings. "I'll have to call you back," I said, my voice distant to my own ears. What followed was 2 weeks of daily, sometimes hourly, calls from my parents. They alternated between desperate pleas, guilt trips, and detailed descriptions of what would happen if they lost their home. Dad talked about becoming homeless. Mom researched shelters in their area, pointedly mentioning their poor conditions. I spent evenings researching housing alternatives for them. Affordable senior apartments in safe neighborhoods. Smaller homes with lower maintenance costs. Even nice manufactured homes in well-maintained communities. I created detailed presentations with photos, costs, and financial projections showing how they could live comfortably within their means. They refused to consider any option. "This is our home," became their mantra. "We raised our family here. All our memories are here." When I suggested they might create new memories in a place that wouldn't financially devastate them, Mom burst into tears. "You don't understand what this house means to us. Remember your 10th birthday when we transformed the backyard into a carnival? Your high school graduation party on the deck? Christmas mornings around the fireplace?" Conveniently, most of these cherished memories centered around Heather's experiences, not mine. My 10th birthday had been a small affair with 2 friends at a local pizza place because they couldn't afford anything elaborate that year. My high school graduation wasn't celebrated because they were attending Heather's dance recital in another city. But pointing this out seemed petty in the face of their potential homelessness. I called Heather again, determined to involve her in the solution. This time she answered, sounding irritated at the interruption. "I know about the house situation," she said before I could explain. "But I just bought a new car, and my credit cards are maxed out. There's literally nothing I can do to help financially. Can you at least look at some alternative housing options with them? They won't even consider my suggestions." "Olivia, you know how much that house means to them. How can you even suggest they leave? Just because you're all about the money doesn't mean everyone is." The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with Heather accusing me of being heartless and me hanging up in frustration. I consulted with my financial planner again, bringing Marcus along this time. The meeting was sobering. Paying off my parents' mortgage would deplete most of our savings and delay our own home purchase by at least 3 years. It would significantly impact our retirement planning and any hopes of starting a family in the near future. "I understand the emotional pull," the planner said gently, "but this is a significant financial sacrifice with no guarantee it solves the underlying problem. Your parents' spending habits haven't changed. What happens when they face the next financial crisis?" Marcus remained supportive but concerned. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you," he said. "But I want to make sure you're doing this for the right reasons, not out of guilt or manipulation." After days of agonizing, I decided to help under strict conditions. I consulted a lawyer who specialized in family financial matters and had her draft a formal loan agreement. The document specified that my contribution would be recorded as a lien against the house, to be repaid when the house was eventually sold or transferred. It included a modest interest rate and required my parents to attend financial counseling. When I presented the agreement, my parents were visibly uncomfortable. "You don't trust us?" Mom asked, hurt evident in her voice. "This protects everyone," I explained. "It ensures I eventually recover this money, and it gives you a structure to follow." "We're family," Dad protested. "Family doesn't need contracts." "Families should respect each other's boundaries," I countered. "This is mine." After much negotiation, we reached a compromise. They would sign the agreement, but with a minimal monthly repayment requirement. The bulk of the loan would be recovered when the house was sold or from their estate. They reluctantly agreed to 3 financial counseling sessions. The day I transferred the money was surreal. Watching $60,000 leave my account created a physical sensation of loss. Marcus held my hand as I clicked confirm on the transaction, neither of us speaking the doubt that hung in the air. My parents' gratitude was effusive and emotional. Mom organized a celebratory dinner at their house, cooking my favorite childhood meals. Dad hugged me repeatedly, his eyes moist. "You saved us," he kept saying. "Our wonderful, successful daughter saved us." Heather didn't attend the dinner, claiming a previous commitment. But the next day, she posted on social media about families sticking together through hard times, with a throwback photo of our parents' house, garnering dozens of sympathetic comments and likes. During dinner, my parents made numerous promises about their future financial behavior. They would stick to the budget. They would consult me before any major purchases. They would start building an emergency fund. I wanted to believe them, needed to believe that this enormous sacrifice would lead to lasting change. For a while, it seemed like it might. They sent their small monthly payments on time. Mom called with updates about cutting unnecessary expenses. Dad mentioned selling some collectibles he'd been holding onto for years. I allowed myself cautious optimism that perhaps this crisis had been the wake-up call they needed. Marcus and I adjusted our plans accordingly. We put our house hunting on indefinite hold. We calculated the long-term impact of the lost investment potential of that money. We created a new, more aggressive savings plan to try to recover some of the financial ground we'd lost. It wasn't ideal, but I felt I'd done the right thing. Family was family after all. Little did I know that the true test of that philosophy was yet to come. For 3 months, things proceeded relatively smoothly. My parents made their token monthly payments of $300 on time. They called less frequently with financial concerns and more often just to chat. I began to relax, focusing on my own career advancement and personal goals again. Marcus and I planned a modest vacation, our first since I'd helped my parents. "We deserve this," he insisted, showing me brochures for a beach rental in a neighboring state. Nothing extravagant, but a necessary break from the stress of the past year. One Sunday morning, Mom called during our weekly catch-up session. The conversation meandered through neighborhood gossip and Dad's latest doctor visit before she casually mentioned they were updating their will. "That's good," I said, thinking it was a positive sign of responsible planning. "It's important to have those documents in order." Yes, we realized after the house situation that we needed to be more organized. Plus, Heather's been asking about inheritance planning for her kids' college funds. Something in her tone caught my attention. "What changes are you making to the will?" I asked innocently. "Oh, nothing major. Just specifying that the house and our other assets will go to Heather. She'll need it more than you will." I nearly dropped the phone. "Wait, what? Everything goes to Heather? Nothing to me?" "Well, honey, you're so successful. You make good money, you have Marcus with his good job, and you're so responsible with finances. Heather struggles, you know that. And she has the kids to think about." "Mom, I just paid $60,000 to save that house. A house you're now saying I have no stake in." "That was a loan, dear. We're paying you back, remember? This is completely different." I ended the call shortly after, my mind spinning. Surely I had misunderstood something. My parents couldn't be this oblivious to the inherent unfairness, could they? I called my father later that day for clarification, hoping he would present a more balanced perspective. Mom mentioned you're updating your will. I began carefully. Yes, finally getting our affairs in order, he said cheerfully. Should have done it years ago. She mentioned everything is going to Heather. Is that accurate?
A pause.
Well, yes. But Olivia, you have to understand, Heather needs the security. She's not financially stable like you. And she has the kids to consider. Dad, I literally just saved your house with my savings. Does that not factor into your decision at all? His voice took on a defensive edge. That was a loan, which we're repaying according to our agreement. Inheritance is different. It's not about what you've done for us. It's about need. You don't need our help. So, I'm being punished for being financially responsible, for working hard, and making good choices. No one's being punished. We're just trying to be practical. Heather will need this support. You won't. No matter how I approach the topic, the conversation circled back to the same justification: Heather's need versus my stability. The $60,000 I'd contributed to their home equity was consistently framed as an entirely separate transaction, not a relevant factor in inheritance planning. When I tried to explain that fairness didn't necessarily mean equal distribution but should acknowledge significant contributions, my parents dismissed my concerns as materialism. We didn't raise you to be so focused on money, Mom said disappointedly. Family helps family, without keeping score. Except, it seemed, when it came to inheritance planning. Then, apparently, score was very much being kept, and my financial success was counting against me. I attempted to discuss the situation with Heather directly. Her response was predictably defensive. They made their decision based on what's best for the family as a whole, she said with an air of superiority. I'm surprised you're being so selfish about this. It's not like you need the money. It's not about need, Heather. It's about acknowledgement and fairness. I just saved their house with my savings. Which they're paying back, she retorted. Why should you get inheritance credit for a loan? That's like a bank expecting gratitude for a mortgage. The family dinner the following weekend was tense and uncomfortable. Unspoken resentments hung in the air as we mechanically passed dishes and maintained superficial conversation. I caught my parents exchanging worried glances when they thought I wasn't looking, but neither made any attempt to address the elephant in the room. After that dinner, I found myself pulling back from regular contact. Weekly calls became bi-weekly, then monthly. I made excuses to miss family gatherings. The hurt was too raw, the injustice too glaring to pretend everything was normal. Marcus witnessed my withdrawal with concern. They're showing you exactly how they value your relationship, he observed one evening. It's okay to create distance when people consistently demonstrate they don't respect your boundaries or contributions. But they're my parents, I said, the familiar refrain feeling hollow even to my own ears. Yes, and you've been an exceptional daughter. But relationships, even family ones, need to be reciprocal to be healthy. I struggled with this reality, caught between lifelong conditioning to prioritize family loyalty and the growing awareness that this loyalty wasn't being reciprocated. The internal conflict affected my sleep, my work, my relationship with Marcus. I found myself questioning my worth, wondering if perhaps I was being selfish or materialistic as my family suggested. Then came the text message that would force me to finally take a stand. Exactly 1 month after the will revelation, my phone chimed with a text notification at 7:42 a.m. I was getting ready for work, halfway through applying mascara, when I glanced at the screen and nearly jabbed myself in the eye. From Mom. Mortgage is due. Can you send $1,800? Thanks, honey. No acknowledgement of the loan agreement. No reference to the $60,000 I'd already provided. No recognition of our recent conflict over the will. Just a casual request for nearly $2,000, as if asking to borrow a cup of sugar. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, mascara wand still in hand, and felt the room spin. My chest tightened, breathing became difficult, and nausea rose in my throat. Marcus found me there 10 minutes later, hyperventilating, phone clutched in my trembling hand. I can't go to work today, I told him after showing him the text. I just can't function right now. He called my office for me, explaining I was dealing with a family emergency. Then he made tea and sat with me in silence until I was ready to talk. I don't understand how they can be so oblivious, I finally said. Or maybe they're not oblivious at all. Maybe they just don't care how this affects me as long as they get what they want. I called my best friend Grace during my lunch break, needing an outside perspective. Grace had known me since college and had witnessed the pattern of financial demands from my family over the years. Olivia, this isn't normal or healthy, she said firmly. You've been conditioned to believe you're responsible for rescuing them, but you're not. They're adults making choices, and you're being treated like an ATM, not a daughter. Her bluntness was exactly what I needed. But how do I break the pattern without completely severing the relationship? By setting boundaries and sticking to them, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. That's the only way they'll learn you're serious. That evening, I did some investigating. A quick scan of my parents' social media revealed photos from a weekend trip to a vineyard resort 3 weeks earlier. The same resort Marcus and I had considered for our anniversary, but decided was outside our budget while we were rebuilding our savings. I called my mother the next morning, determined to address the situation directly. Mom, I saw the pictures from the vineyard resort. That place costs at least $400 a night. A pause. We needed a little getaway. Your father's health, you know. The doctor said stress reduction is important. And now you're asking me for mortgage money? After spending on a luxury weekend? That's completely different, she replied defensively. The trip was a necessary mental health expense. The mortgage is an unexpected shortfall. The mortgage is due the same time every month, Mom. It's the opposite of unexpected. The conversation deteriorated from there, with my mother employing her usual tactics of deflection, emotional manipulation, and eventually tears. I don't understand why you're being so difficult, she sobbed. After everything we've done for you. I ended the call feeling drained but more resolved than ever. A conversation with Heather proved equally frustrating. I would help if I could, she claimed, but I'm stretched thin right now. Yet her Instagram told a different story. New designer purse, expensive haircut and color treatment, dinner at an upscale restaurant with friends, all posted within the past week. I finally scheduled an appointment with a therapist, recognizing I needed professional help navigating this dysfunctional family dynamic. Dr. Torres listened to my story with compassionate attention, then offered perspective that resonated deeply. Your parents have created a situation where you're the financial safety net, but Heather is the emotional favorite, she explained. It's a common but unhealthy family pattern. You've been assigned a role that benefits everyone but you. How do I change that? I asked. By refusing to play the role anymore. It will be uncomfortable. They will resist. But if you want a healthier relationship, something has to change, and since you can't control their behavior, it has to start with yours. The stress began manifesting physically. I lost 5 pounds in 2 weeks. Insomnia left me exhausted. I developed a persistent eye twitch. Marcus watched with growing concern as the situation consumed more and more of my mental and emotional energy. This is affecting us now, he said gently one evening. Our plans, our future, our relationship. At some point, you have to decide what matters more, appeasing your parents or building our life together. He was right, and I knew it. But knowing what I needed to do and actually doing it were very different things. The pressure intensified as my parents recruited extended family members to their cause. My aunt called to remind me of family obligations. My cousin texted asking why I was abandoning my parents in their time of need. Even my elderly grandmother was enlisted, her trembling voice on the phone wondering where she had gone wrong raising a daughter who raised such a selfish granddaughter. Dad left voicemails mentioning his blood pressure was dangerously high due to the stress. Mom sent texts about Heather's children asking why Aunt Olivia doesn't love us anymore. Each message was a carefully aimed arrow at my most vulnerable points. After a week of this coordinated emotional assault, I reached my breaking point. I spent an entire Saturday in tears, alternating between rage and guilt, while Marcus provided silent support. Understanding this was a battle I needed to fight internally before I could address it externally. By Sunday morning, I had made my decision. With Dr. Torres's guidance, I drafted potential responses to my mother's original text, trying to find the right balance between firmness and respect. I needed to establish boundaries without burning bridges I might want to cross again someday. The moment had come to stand my ground, regardless of the consequences. After carefully considering my options, I crafted a response that was firm but not cruel. I've already given $60,000 to save the house that I'm not inheriting. It's time for Heather to step up. I read it to Marcus before sending. Are you sure? He asked. This might change your relationship with them permanently. The relationship has already changed, I replied. I'm just acknowledging it now. I hit send and felt an immediate wave of anxiety followed by surprising relief. No matter what happened next, I had finally spoken my truth. Mom's response came within minutes. How dare you throw your help in our faces? We never raised you to be so cold and calculating. Your father is devastated. I didn't respond to the text, instead calling and suggesting a family meeting. We need to have this conversation face to face. I'll come over tomorrow evening at 7. The 24 hours before the meeting were filled with nervous anticipation. I prepared notes to keep myself focused during what would inevitably be an emotional conversation. Marcus offered to accompany me, but I declined. This is something I need to do myself, I explained. When I arrived at my parents' house, the house my money had saved, I was surprised to see Heather's car in the driveway. I hadn't expected her to attend, but perhaps it was better to have everyone present for this reckoning. Mom answered the door with a tight smile. We're in the living room, she said, her tone clipped. The atmosphere was tense as I entered. Dad sat in his recliner, looking older and more fragile than I remembered. Mom perched on the edge of the sofa, back straight, hands clasped in her lap. Heather lounged in the corner armchair, scrolling through her phone until she noticed my arrival. Let's get this over with, she said, setting her phone aside with obvious reluctance. I took a deep breath and began. I'm here because we need to address some unhealthy patterns in our family. I've been providing financial support for years, culminating in the $60,000 I gave to save this house. Now I discover I've been excluded from the will, and you're still asking for more money. Mom immediately interrupted. We never asked for the $60,000. You offered, and we're paying it back, just like we agreed. $300 a month would take over 16 years to repay, Mom. And that's assuming you actually make every payment, which history suggests is unlikely. Dad spoke up, his voice quiet but disapproving. We raised you better than this, Olivia. Family helps family. Period. I agree, Dad. Family helps family. But help shouldn't only flow in one direction. I've been helping for years. When have you ever considered how your financial requests impact my life? I pulled out a folder containing documentation of every loan I'd provided over the past decade. Dates, amounts, promised repayment terms, actual repayment, or lack thereof. The total, excluding the recent $60,000, exceeded $42,000. This represents years of sacrifices on my part, I explained, spreading the papers on the coffee table. Vacations not taken. A home purchase delayed. Retirement contributions reduced. Real consequences to my financial well-being and future security. Mom barely glanced at the documents. So, you've been keeping score all this time? How petty. It's not about keeping score. It's about acknowledging reality. These financial transfers happened. They affected my life. And now I'm being told I'm excluded from your will because I'm financially stable. Stability I've fought for despite consistently providing support to this family. Heather finally engaged. Not everyone had your advantages, Olivia. Some of us struggled more. What advantages, exactly? I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college. I lived on ramen and caffeine for years. I built my career through hard work and determination. Those weren't advantages, they were choices. As the conversation continued, Heather's expression gradually shifted from defensive to confused. Wait, you paid for Dad's gallbladder surgery? They told me insurance covered it. Insurance covered part of it. I paid the $4,700 balance. And the roof repair last year? They said they used their savings. Their savings account has been empty for years. I paid $6,200 for the roof. Heather looked at our parents. Is this true? You've been telling me different stories about where this money came from. Mom shifted uncomfortably. We didn't want to burden you with our problems. But burdening Olivia was fine? Heather asked, surprising me with her sudden insight. The conversation took an unexpected turn as years of family secrets began unraveling. Heather learned that many of the gifts our parents had given her over the years had been financed by my contributions. I discovered that Heather had been told I refused to help with certain expenses, when in fact I'd never been asked. You've been playing us against each other, Heather realized aloud, making each of us think the other was less supportive or caring. Our parents' manipulative tactics became increasingly apparent as we compared notes. They had maintained their position as family gatekeepers by controlling the flow of information, creating artificial divisions between Heather and me that prevented us from presenting a united front. After 2 hours of increasingly heated discussion, I finally presented my terms. I will not be providing any additional financial support, I stated firmly. The loan agreement for the $60,000 remains in effect. I expect acknowledgement of my contributions in your estate planning, not because I need the money, but because it's the right thing to do. Mom's face hardened. So, that's your ultimatum? Help us, or you're not part of this family anymore?
No, Mom.
That's your ultimatum. I'm simply stating my boundaries. I'm still your daughter. I still love you, but I won't be your bank anymore. After everything we've done for you, Dad said, shaking his head in disappointment. What exactly have you done, Dad? Educationally, financially, emotionally. When have you ever put my needs first? When have you ever sacrificed for me the way I've sacrificed for this family? His silence was answer enough. To my surprise, Heather spoke up. They're not going to change, Olivia. They can't even see what they're doing. Our eyes met in a moment of unprecedented understanding. For the first time, my sister was seeing the dynamic clearly, recognizing patterns that had shaped our family for decades. I stood, gathering my documentation. I need to go. I've said what I came to say. I hope we can build a healthier relationship moving forward, but that's up to all of us, not just me. Mom remained silent, lips pressed into a thin line. Dad stared at the floor. Heather followed me to the door. I didn't know, she said quietly. About all the money, the manipulation. I'm sorry. It's not your fault, I replied. We were both playing roles assigned us long ago. As I walked to my car, the weight of years of unreciprocated obligation began to lift from my shoulders. The path forward was uncertain, the relationships damaged perhaps beyond repair, but I had finally honored my own worth. Whatever happened next, I would face it standing firmly in my truth. I cried the entire drive home, tears of grief mixed with liberation. Once safely in my driveway, I called Marcus, my voice breaking as I tried to explain what had happened. Come home, he said simply. I'll be waiting. He held me as I sobbed on our couch, the emotional aftermath of years of dysfunctional dynamics finally breaking through. I'm proud of you, he whispered. I know how hard that was. The week that followed was emotionally turbulent. My parents didn't call, though I received a series of increasingly guilt-laden texts from my mother. Hope you're happy with yourself. Your father barely slept last night. After all we've sacrificed for you. I read each one but didn't respond, following Dr. Torres's advice to give myself space to process before engaging further. On day 5, I received an unexpected message from Heather. Can we talk? Just us. We met at a neutral coffee shop halfway between our homes. The conversation was awkward at first, years of competition and resentment creating a barrier neither of us quite knew how to breach. I've been thinking about everything you said, Heather finally offered. Looking back at patterns I never questioned before. You were right about a lot of it. I didn't want to be right, I admitted. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to believe there was some explanation that would make it all make sense, that would justify how they've treated me. Heather nodded. I always thought you had it all together. The perfect daughter with the perfect life who never needed anything from anyone. That's how they always described you to me. And I thought you were spoiled and entitled, always taking and never giving back. That's how they described you to me. We shared a sad smile, recognizing how thoroughly we'd been manipulated into these opposing roles. They needed you to be the provider and me to be the dependent, Heather observed. It served them somehow. Our conversation lasted hours, filled with revelations and connections neither of us had been able to make before. While we didn't emerge as best friends, we did establish a new understanding, a foundation for a potentially healthier sister relationship independent of our parents' influence. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding financially. Marcus and I created a revised budget, adjusting our goals and timelines to account for the money that would likely never be repaid. I took on additional consulting projects, channeling my energy into constructive work rather than family drama. I consulted with a lawyer about potentially recovering the $60,000 loan. While he confirmed I had legal standing based on the signed agreement, he cautioned that pursuing it would be costly, time-consuming, and emotionally draining. You need to decide if the money is worth the additional conflict, he advised. After careful consideration, I decided not to pursue legal action immediately. My mental health was more valuable than money I might recover years down the road after a bitter legal battle. Instead, I would maintain the loan agreement as documentation of the debt, to be addressed when the house was eventually sold or transferred. With Dr. Torres's guidance, I began examining how the patterns in my family of origin had affected other relationships in my life. I discovered I had a tendency to overfunction for others, taking responsibility for problems that weren't mine to solve. I worked on building stronger boundaries not just with my parents but with friends, colleagues, and even Marcus. My friend group became increasingly important as my family relationships remained strained. Grace hosted regular dinner parties where I connected with people who respected my boundaries and valued my company without financial expectations. Amanda included me in her family's holiday celebrations when I chose not to attend my parents' gatherings. Kevin and his husband invited Marcus and me on weekend hiking trips that provided much-needed perspective and peace. 3 months after our confrontation, I received a letter from my parents. Written in my father's careful handwriting, it acknowledged, partially, the unfairness of their expectations and the imbalance in our relationship. While not a complete acceptance of responsibility, it represented a small step toward potential reconciliation. We've been thinking about what you said, the letter concluded. We don't agree with everything, but we recognize we've asked too much of you without proper appreciation. We're not sure where we go from here, but we don't want to lose you from our lives. I responded with a brief note expressing appreciation for their reflection and suggesting we move forward slowly, with new, clearly defined boundaries in place. Around the same time, Heather experienced her own financial crisis when she lost her job and struggled to find new employment. Rather than immediately stepping in with money, I offered to review her resume, practice interview techniques, and connect her with potential networking opportunities. She initially resisted this approach, accustomed to financial bailouts, but eventually engaged with the process and secured a stable position with growth potential. I see what you mean now, she told me over coffee to celebrate her new job. Teaching someone to fish instead of just giving them fish. It feels different. Better, somehow. As the 1-year anniversary of my $60,000 loan approached, I reflected on how much had changed. My parents had made their small monthly payments consistently, though without any acknowledgement of the larger issues at play. We maintained cordial but distant contact, speaking every few weeks in carefully neutral conversations that avoided financial topics entirely. The will situation remained unresolved. When I gently raised the issue during a phone call, my mother quickly changed the subject. I decided not to push the matter for now, recognizing that true change would take time if it happened at all. More importantly, I had changed. I no longer felt responsible for my parents' financial well-being. I no longer experienced anxiety when their names appeared on my caller ID. I had learned to separate love from enabling, to offer support without sacrificing my own security and self-respect. Marcus noticed the difference. You stand taller now, he observed one evening as we walked along the river near our apartment. Like you've put down a heavy backpack you've been carrying for years. That night, he proposed, presenting a simple but elegant ring that represented our shared values of authenticity and resilience. I want to build a family with you, he said. One based on mutual respect and real love, not obligation or manipulation. As we began planning our future together, I made a conscious decision to break the dysfunctional patterns I'd experienced growing up. Our financial discussions were open and honest. Our support for each other was reciprocal and freely given. We established healthy boundaries with both families, determined to create something different from what either of us had known before. The journey wasn't over. Family patterns established over decades don't disappear overnight. There would be more difficult conversations, more boundaries tested, more painful realizations. But I faced these challenges with a new understanding of my own worth, no longer defined by what I could provide to others, but by who I chose to be and how I chose to live. In the end, the most valuable thing I gained wasn't the money, though I remained hopeful some of it might eventually be repaid. It was the knowledge that I deserved relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. That my worth wasn't measured by my financial contributions or ability to rescue others. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others is to say no when saying yes would perpetuate harmful patterns.
So what do you think?
Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who kept asking for money? Would you have handled this situation differently? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you found my story helpful or relatable, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more content about navigating complicated family dynamics and building financial independence. Share this video with someone who might be struggling with similar issues. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these challenges makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth isn't determined by what you give to others, but by being true to yourself.